Blueprint number 42 contains a fatal flaw, Julian. I tapped the silver compass against the tempered glass table, the sharp metallic clack cutting straight through the $60 million fundraising pitch. If you had actually designed that dome structure yourself, you would know it will collapse into pieces the moment it catches the first gale on the East Coast. The entire Seattle Convention Center auditorium, gathering 500 of the most formidable investors, sank into an ice-cold silence. The bitterly thick, dark aroma of black coffee lingering in that stuffy Chicago basement early that morning still clung tightly to my memory. That was a gray November morning, the moment the Aegis project officially took shape on stacks of scratch paper covered in graphite dust. My father, Mr. Nathaniel Sterling, was once a monument in the green architecture circle before a heart attack took him away 4 years ago. The Sterling Design Group he built single-handedly was never merely a money-printing machine. He built it upon the foundation of sustainability, of designs that respected nature and protected humanity. The day I graduated from the Design Academy, he did not gift me a car or an expensive watch. He handed me a solid silver compass, the very first tool he used when starting his career, along with the advice that a great architect is not defined by drawing flashy skyscrapers, but by the ability to create the sturdiest refuge when the storm hits. But ever since the day his will was announced, the Sterling name has slid down an irreversible slope. According to the lawyer's arrangement, my older brother Julian took over the chief executive chair, while Uncle Victor held the role of chief financial officer. I, the youngest daughter who only knew how to bury her head in structural blueprints, was appointed chief architect with a fixed salary, pushed down to work in the poorly lit basement of the glass skyscraper. I had naively believed that blood would always protect blood. I bit my tongue and endured the useless luxury resort contracts, the entertainment complexes swallowing millions of gallons of water a day that Julian brought in, just to trade for the right to use the materials laboratory at night. The Aegis project was the passion of my entire life. It was a modular dome housing system, utilizing recycled reinforced steel combined with ultralight polymer, capable of withstanding Category 5 hurricane winds, while costing only a third of a traditional single-story house to build. My target demographic was not the ultra-rich in Michigan, but the coastal communities frequently devastated by natural disasters. I stayed awake for hundreds of agonizing nights. I personally tested the surface tension of every single alloy bar, scratching out countless drafts with the silver compass. On a late February Friday afternoon, I brought draft number 4, a nearly finalized version, up to the penthouse office to submit to Julian. The oak door was left ajar. Inside, the overwhelming smell of cigars rushed straight into my nose. Julian was resting his legs on the desk, taking a sip of scotch, his hand skimming through financial reports. Uncle Victor sat on the leather sofa, tapping his fingers adorned with solid gold rings. As I rolled the zero blueprint onto the desk and began explaining the potential of Aegis to alter the landscape of relief construction, Julian merely let out a soft sigh. He took his expensive fountain pen and swept the roll of paper onto the carpeted floor. He spoke in a flat tone, stating that Sterling Design Group was not a charity organization. He called this pile of steel and iron trash a waste of company resources, saying I should head back to the basement and finish the infinity pool blueprint for that Texas oil millionaire. I packed up the drawing in silence, tucked it neatly into the cylindrical tube, and told myself I would find an independent investment fund as soon as the project was 100% complete. But the greed of men in suits never has an endpoint. 3 months after the day I was mocked, I discovered a terrifying truth about the financial state of the company. While searching for old tax documents on the internal server system, I accidentally accessed a hidden folder managed by Uncle Victor. Sterling Design Group was standing on the brink of bankruptcy. Julian had used our father's reputation to borrow tens of millions of dollars from black market credit funds to invest in delusional commercial real estate projects, and all of them were frozen. They were desperately thirsting for cash. Suspicion began to ignite within me. The next morning, as I stepped down to the working basement, I saw the door of my personal locker wide open. The electronic lock was smashed. The entire backup hard drive, the three-dimensional printed models, and the original file folder of the Aegis project had evaporated without a trace. I rushed straight up to the penthouse, slamming my hand hard against the glass door of the conference room before pushing it wide open. Julian and Victor were sitting there with a team of corporate lawyers. When I demanded they return the documents, Julian did not even bother to stand up. He leaned back in his chair, interlocking his 10 fingers. His words flowed out smoothly as if memorized beforehand. He declared that I was a full-time contracted employee, using the company's computer, the company's electricity, and the company's software. Therefore, according to intellectual property laws, every idea I generated inside this building was an asset under the board of directors' right of disposal. Victor delivered a fatal blow by sliding a termination paper across the table. They falsely accused me of breaching internal data security and terminated my labor contract effective immediately. 2 massive security guards in black uniforms stepped in, roughly grabbed my arms, escorted me out of the building, and threw the cardboard box containing a few cheap personal items onto the slushy, snow-covered sidewalk of Chicago. Their cruelty did not stop at kicking me to the curb. They wanted to sever my means of survival. Other architecture firms in the city unanimously rejected my job applications. After just 1 week, I realized Julian had spread rumors within the industry's human resources network that I was a psychologically unstable person who frequently stole ideas from colleagues. Savings depleted, credit cards locked. I had to return the keys to my downtown apartment, moving to a miserable, damp boarding house on the edge of the industrial zone. For 2 whole months, I lived on canned food, burying myself in the darkness, wondering whether my father's teachings about integrity were just a cruel lie. Then one midsummer morning, a giant electronic billboard appeared right at the highway intersection. The image of the Dome House model, familiar down to every detail, lit up brilliantly, accompanied by massive text promoting the Aerosphere project. Julian's image sat proudly in the right corner, paired with the glamorous title of a pioneer in ecological architecture. The blood vessels in my temples throbbed violently. They did not just steal my design. They renamed it, using it as bait to call for a massive funding round to cover up the company's debt deficit. But as I glued my eyes to every structural line displayed on the advertising screen, an electric current ran down my spine. The blueprint Julian was using was draft number 4. That was the draft he had thrown onto the floor that day, which was also the only thing sitting in the locker when he broke the lock. They had absolutely no idea that, after that day, I had continued to recalculate the aerodynamic drag and created the final draft number 7. Draft number 4 contained a fatal error at the central load-bearing connection angle. I rummaged for my battered old phone, dialing a number saved in the emergency contacts. The call connected to Boston. The person answering the phone was Ms. Evelyn Carmichael. She used to be my graduation project advisory professor, currently the chief executive officer of the largest green technology venture capital fund on the East Coast. I sold off my rusty car, scraping together my last dollars to buy a cheap overnight flight ticket to Boston. Evelyn's antique mansion sat quietly beneath the large oak trees. When I rolled out the version 7 drawing, the thing I always kept close to my body in my worn-out backpack, onto her solid wood dining table, the space was left with only the ticking of the grandfather clock. I used a red pen, circling the crucial connection point between the grade 3 aluminum alloy arches. I thoroughly explained to Evelyn the error in draft number 4 that the Sterling Company was touting. If the Aerosphere system were mass-produced based on those specifications, when the pressure differential caused by wind force exceeded 100 miles per hour, the aluminum joints would rip the ceiling apart. The entire mass of steel and polymer would collapse, burying anyone taking shelter inside. Evelyn did not say a single word for 20 solid minutes. She used a magnifying glass to scrutinize every digit, cross-referencing them with basic laws of physics. Finally, she removed her horn-rimmed glasses, picked up the desk phone, and dialed directly to the legal team of Carmichael Ventures. She ordered them to prepare a special dossier and instructed me absolutely not to leave Boston. The plan was mapped out in absolute silence. 14 days later, the Ecological Design Summit opened at the Seattle Downtown Convention Center. This was the most brutal arena, where startup founders came to pitch visionary ideas and seek massive funding checks. Julian and Victor had borrowed hundreds of thousands of dollars more just to rent the most colossal exhibition booth right in the center, accompanied by a prime-time presentation slot on the main stage. They thirsted for the $60 million investment from the Syndicate Fund to salvage the glamorous facade that was rotting away. They were completely unaware that Evelyn Carmichael was a core member of the senior judging panel this year, and she had entered my name on the accompanying technical appraisal specialist list. Torrential rain battered the transparent glass dome of the convention center. The vast auditorium did not have a single empty seat left. The dim lighting highlighted a series of state-of-the-art graphic display screens. Julian stepped out onto the stage in an expensive custom-tailored suit, his hair slicked back with gel. He held the remote, striding with the confidence of someone born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He began his presentation with a fabricated, tear-jerking story about our father's final years, about how he had uttered his dying wish to save humanity. He talked endlessly about the process of him staying up countless nights in the laboratory, pouring his heart and soul into sketching the shape of the Aerosphere. In the front row, Uncle Victor nodded in praise, occasionally using a silk handkerchief to wipe the corner of his eyes, performing a perfect theatrical act. The investors began flipping through the crisp, color-printed documents, whispers of praise echoing along the rows of seats. A scam of the century was going off without a hitch right in front of hundreds of people. Evelyn sat at the long judge's table, her hands intertwined. She slightly turned her head toward where I was standing in the hidden corner near the audio control board. She nodded. Just a slight and decisive nod. That was when I stepped forward, grabbing the backup wireless microphone and pushing the volume slider to the absolute maximum. Blueprint number 42 contains a fatal flaw, Julian. The tap of the compass and my voice echoed through the surround sound system, sharp and dry. Julian halted in the middle of the stage. He squinted through the blinding spotlights. When he realized the person standing 20 paces away from me was me, he dropped the remote control from his hand, stumbling backward to grip the edge of the podium tightly. He grabbed his own microphone. His biceps tensed under the suit jacket. He roared, directing the security forces present in the hall to quickly escort me outside, calling me a resentful former employee spreading baseless rumors to sabotage the company. 2 guards in reflective vests began advancing toward me from the 2 side aisles. "Let her speak." Evelyn's authoritative voice rang out through the judge's table microphone. The two guards stopped dead in their tracks. She stood up straight, forcefully throwing Julian's presentation folder onto the desk. Ms. Aliner is the technical appraisal specialist directly appointed by Carmichael Ventures. Answer her question, Mr. Sterling. The atmosphere in the conference room felt as if all the oxygen had been sucked out. I took slow strides down the main aisle, my eyes never leaving the man standing on the podium. I will repeat, blueprint number 42, the central load-bearing column. I emphasized every syllable. Explain to the appraisal panel, why did you use grade 3 aluminum alloy for the joints at a 45-degree angle when the ceiling weight and the wind drag coefficient exceed its maximum load capacity by 25%? He stood frozen. He took a step back. The folder fell to the floor. The rustling sound of paper echoed. No one picked them up. He glanced over at Uncle Victor, who was sitting motionless in his chair. He stammered out a few broken words through the microphone, attempting to make excuses that the in-depth physical details were handled by the junior engineering department, and that he himself only managed the overarching direction and macro vision. Your macro vision was stealing a flawed draft from your own younger sister, and then using it to mobilize $60 million through deception. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a carefully sealed stack of documents. I threw it onto the judge's table. That is the National Intellectual Property Copyright Certificate for the Aegis load-bearing joint technology. It was registered under my name as an independent individual in January 2022. That is 6 months before you broke the lock on my filing cabinet. Furious whispers erupted from the rows of seats. Investors began swiping their phones to look up information. In the front row, a powerful figure, the chief executive officer of the largest energy technology conglomerate in Silicon Valley, immediately signaled his assistant to pack up their belongings. Uncle Victor darted onto the stage, forgetting that Julian's microphone was still picking up audio. Victor's panicked whisper blared straight out of the speakers. "Turn off the projector, you fool. We are done for. Cancel the transaction orders." Victor frantically wrestled the device out of Julian's hand. Carmichael Ventures officially withdraws all preliminary agreement documents regarding the Sterling Design Group. Evelyn declared loudly, sweeping a gaze of contempt toward the two men on stage. "And we will hand over this entire fraudulent technical dossier to the Federal Investigation Committee on the charge of large-scale financial fraud. You two did not just steal intellectual property. You planned to build mass murder machines." The display screen system showing the Aerosphere project suddenly went pitch black as the center's technical team cut the stage power. The organizing committee security force stepped onto the podium, but not to chase me away. They demanded Julian and Victor hand over all access badges and immediately clear out their booth to leave the exhibition area. In the dim light of the dispersing hall, I saw Uncle Victor pointing his finger directly at Julian's face, screaming curses that Julian had guaranteed all legal traces were wiped clean. The fake alliance built on money shattered into pieces in just a few dozen seconds. I turned my back and walked against the stream of people rushing toward the emergency exits. The aisle widened as the investors automatically parted to both sides. I crossed the massive waiting lobby, pushing hard against the giant revolving door. The Seattle rain splashed freezing cold against my face. The silver compass rested snugly in my wool coat pocket, radiating a strange warmth. Everything was over.